Hello, you multi. Merry Marvel Merchant Mutants. MFS. I'll leave that MFS as an abbreviation. And thank you to Don Bon, B-O-H-N, for that malt mention introducing Ralphie Review 962 extras. So I have reviewed a whisky in review 962, and it was this whisky, Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength, very popular, in-demand Irish whisky, because Ireland is increasingly being perceived quite rightly as a destination for exciting, original, flavoursome whiskies. And I want to talk a little bit about Irish whisky generally and where I'm at with it, because I will be reviewing more Irish whisky this year, but I'm being very, very careful about what I review. And so you'll be seeing brands which are not big names. And I hopefully we'll be reviewing Blue Spot, which is a Mitchells and Sons independent bottling of Middleton pure pot still whisky, and I think it's probably one of the most dynamic and flavoursome. So I've got that in order, and I'll be reviewing an independent bottling of an Irish whisky which has not been exclusively matured in oak casks. Now that's interesting. I'm going to come back to that shortly. I'm going to start with just setting the scenes here, in that when I got into whisky in the 1980s, when it came to Irish whisky, you had Jamesons in the south and Bushmills in the north, and occasionally you'd see something Tullamore Dew in the middle, but that was basically it. The availability and selection of Irish whisky from right across Ireland in the north and the south was frankly very limited, and what was available was heavily industrialised. So you had to look out for these rare independent bottlings from the likes of Napogue Castle of Irish whisky to actually get an authentically delivered integrity version of an Irish whisky, and these were very few and far between. You just have to wait till they appeared in some specialist delicatessen licensed retailer or one of the fledgling online whisky shops before you could get a chance to buy one. And that's the lie. That was the lie of the land. And I must admit, I enjoyed the Black Bushmills, which was sherry matured. In the old days, it was really well done. Delightful, balanced sherried whisky. My recommendation is do not buy it now. You will be disappointed. It is an absolute distant shadow of what it used to be and what it should be. Bushmills has had a series of owners who are sort of plundering the resource. I'm not impressed with any of them. None of them are really delivering what Bushmills is capable of being. And if you look for a bottle of Bushmills, the most available is the non-age statement, and it's super sweet. It is a confectionery whisky, and that is, they're presenting that as the house style of Bushmills, and it's not doing the whisky any justice whatsoever. Old bottlings, because they're few and far between, are outrageously expensive and somewhat lacklustre, in my opinion. See, it's an opinion. So don't, if you're an Irish whisky fan, big Bushmills fan, don't freak out at me. I'm just giving an opinion, and we can do that. Down in the south, you've got Jamesons. Now, how ubiquitous does Jamesons get as an Irish whisky brand? The biggest market for Jamesons is in parts of the United States where they want a glugging whisky. They want a whisky which has got very little flavour. In fact, they want a whisky that's approaching the consistency and delivery of a vodka. So you've got a whisky vodka type fusion thing with Jamesons. Very palatable, very basic, very practical, and it goes great with your Budweiser, because Budweiser is equally as anemic. Now, there's some few interesting Jamesons. There's the Jamesons used to be called the Crested 10, which was a Jameson's official bottling incorporating pure pot still whiskey. And when they experimented with it in the United States, people didn't like the flavour because it was sour and bitter. You see, the thing is, many American palates are so conditioned to super sweet. I mean, this is a country, America, United States, where they put sugar into bread to make it sweet. Standard bread is in fact a French style of brioche. That's how sweet it is. So you've got this cultural super sweet tooth, which isn't helped by the mass consumption of sodas, confectionery, and even meat products have sugar put in them to make them more eatable. But that's for another. I'm not going to go any further with that. But in the European market, Crested 10 from Jameson's was available. Really interesting, something different. But the real drama occurred about 15 years ago when Green Spot became available as an independent bottling of a Dublin licensed liquor store who were selling an integrity version of Jameson's, and it was really, really good stuff. Still is competent, but not quite as great as it used to be. And when I discovered a bottle of that, which I was able to buy online, that was the game changer for me. I looked at a few other distilleries, but I wasn't really getting anywhere until I discovered Cooley. Now, Cooley Distillery started off as basically a simple setup on a farm to make use of disfigured potatoes. And they were making vodka and neutral grain spirit. And then they said, well, hang about, let's make some whiskey. Really, it all happened by accident. And one of the finest, most extraordinary and original Irish whiskey styles is from Cooley Distillery in Dundalk. Now, have you heard of Cooley? Right, probably not, because Cooley whiskey's been bought up by fledgling Irish distilleries who are now bottling it as their own whiskey under their own brand and putting it out as their own because they don't have any information in their bottlings to tell you otherwise. Now that's naughty. It's misdirection. It's not telling lies. It's not cheating under the guidelines. But it's deceit, unfortunately. And the challenge for the distilleries is when they start producing their own spirit, bottling it, it better be as good as Cooley, otherwise they're going to lose a lot of customers. Particularly with all the competition that's going on these days. Talking of which, have you any idea how many new distilleries have started up in Ireland in the last 10 years? Let me tell you something, I've lost count. The last count I did was about 35. They're cropping up all over the place, and they all have to prove themselves. Being in Scotland, I've been able to see the new generation of Irish whiskey makers making the mistakes and learning from it, and having to learn fast. And going to Cooley and understanding how Cooley, because it's easy to get by them for them to buy casks of Cooley whiskey. Why is this whiskey so good? It's not by design. It's not because it's engineered that way. It's because they're just decent pot stills and it was done by default. You can still find one of the best versions of Cooley bottled as 10-year-old Dunville's whiskey. Okay? I first encountered Cooley as a supermarket bottling. £14 I paid for it. That's about 16 euros. £14 a bottle for 10-year-old Irish whiskey, and it was extraordinary, magical, and that was at 40%. Absolutely exploding with flavour. A genuinely exciting bottling. I've got 3 bottles left. I'm keeping them for special occasions. So I know what Irish whiskey can be, but now we've got to wait and see how the distilleries actually do. 2 distilleries that stand out to me as well worth watching are Dingle and West Cork. Those are 2 distilleries I'm watching closely. And I'm also really interested in the fact that Irish whiskey is not confined to only using malted barley or malted and unmalted barley, which is an exciting traditional permutation of Irish whiskey called pure pot still style. The combination, and it has to be triple distilled to get the yield, to break down the enzymes in the unmalted barley, but you get these beautiful green flavours. The secret of success: don't over distill. Push the stills. Get into the faints a little bit. Pull out the flavour. It's in there, particularly from a nice slow fermentation. What else can I say about whiskey from Ireland? Well, another huge advantage that Irish whiskey has, which never gets mentioned, shh, keep it to yourself. They're not restricted to using oak wood casks. Seriously, Scotch whiskey now has one arm tied behind its back because Scottish regulations and its legal requirements says that you've got to use oak casks, oak wood casks up to a maximum of 700 litres capacity for maturation. Got no choice. Irish whiskey can use any other wood they want. Chestnut, cherry wood, spruce wood, anything. That is a massive advantage. Now can you imagine a little bit of spruce or conifer influence in a pure pot still style whiskey? So you're adding green to the green. I don't know if anybody's doing it, but I would. I most certainly would. Another thing with Irish distillers, they're getting their act together with their cooperaging. They now have trained, experienced coopers who are earning very, very good money, by the way, in case you're looking for a job. And any distillery, they need hands-on coopers. Machines won't cut it, won't do it. You need coopers. If you don't have coopers, you don't have competent casks for maturation. You've got leaks, you've got increasing recycling, sandblasting out old casks and trying to reuse them, because machines can assemble a cask, but coopers make casks. It's different, big different, not a small difference. Another thing about Irish whiskey is that they can produce other spirits, including poitín. The varieties of poitín are infinite, and we've only just begun to see what Irish whiskey is capable of there. I mean, the old folklore was, I mean, it was not folklore, it's true. You know, the best liquor in Ireland would be made in a farmhouse, in a back shed, and it's called poitín. Why was it so good? Because it was made with love and experience, that's why. By people who really, really have a natural feel and affinity for what they're doing. That's why when I was growing up in Glasgow, anybody appeared on the scene with a wee bottle of poitín at a party, my goodness, they didn't have to look for friends. Always very, very high strength and very, very flavoursome, interesting, aromatic stuff. So that's really where Irish whiskey is at the moment. Is there too many Irish distilleries? Time will tell. What there isn't is enough international awareness of Irish whiskey's identity. That's certainly the case. Irish whiskey is still identified purely as, for sippers, not chuggers, for sippers, Redbreast, Spot, Napogue Castle, because I believe they're still doing independent bottlings. And there's a few smaller brands which have never gained traction, like Connemara. Peated Irish whiskey. The thing is, the peats come from Scotland, so it's believed that it's not authentic, and therefore it's not taken seriously, and that's a real shame. And also, I've tasted some batches which were a bit iffy. Peated Irish whiskey needs a good proportion of fresh casks, juicy wet casks. in order to work. So what do I recommend you look out for in Irish whiskey? If you're getting started, you want to taste pure pot still style. The quality's not, in my opinion, what it can be, but this is where you'll find it. Redbreast, Spot, go for the Spots, and also Powers Johns Lane, 12-year-old. Distilleries, other distilleries that are getting more traction now, are starting to produce their own pot still, pure pot still, but they're still experimenting, still finding their recipe, finding their feet, and finding their age in these whiskies. So you can be a little bit disappointed. The Irish whiskey distillery collectively have never been shy about putting out really young whiskey at fairly ambitious prices, and it's something that will settle down. I am sure of that, because the zeitgeist has now moved, funnily enough, to England, to English whiskey. That's where some really, really good quality, interesting integrity bottlings are to be found. Talking of integrity bottlings, any Irish whiskey distillery that wants to be taken seriously, unchill filtered, natural colour, minimum 46% bottling, then you'll be taken seriously. Because a lot of people are buying when they see these 3 virtue signals. Okay, Irish distillers, I know some of you, a few of you, are listening to this and watching. I'm Ralphie. Cheers. That's okay. I'll do. Fills a space. Pop back again for Ralphie Review 964. It'll be long. It'll be a long fairly soon, because a week doesn't. It's not a long time, a week. And I will be reviewing another winner from the 2022 Online Scotch Whisky Awards. I'm Ralphie. Thank you for watching. Click subscribe if you haven't, and remember, I've got a Patreon channel, patreon.com, and it's called Ralphie, and you get extra videos, extra content, and you get live streams, monthly live streams now. Thank you. Where's my clicker? It seems a bit over the top, but hey, it does the job.